Well, hello and welcome to the 27th Degree with Chris and Nancy, being broadcast from the BioSkills of Northeast Studio in Fall River, Mass. Today, we'll be discussing infusion therapy with Bernie Lambrese, CEO of Sweet Life. Before we begin our conversation, I would like to thank our sponsors, Bay Coast Bank. Bay Coast Bank is just right for all of your financial needs. Visit baycoast.bank or call 508-678-7641 to learn more. In Duncan Hearing Healthcare you can trust, with sites in Fall River, Dartmouth, Falmouth, and Centerville. For more information, visit their website, duncanhearing.com. As always, you can support the 27th Degree with Chris and Nancy by subscribing to us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform, and by following us on Facebook and Instagram. And also, please remember to leave a review, hopefully a good review. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for everyone for listening to our show. Let's start. Bernie, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this field?
Sure. I've been a healthcare entrepreneur for, close to 40 years now. Been involved in all types of home health care. I started and developed a home infusion business several years ago, where we would take care of patients at home that needed intravenous medication like antibiotics. Those were more acute patients that were on for a defined period of time. Along the way, I was also involved in businesses where we provided medical supplies, and we had a thriving home health agency where we used to do a lot of work with primary care, the physicians and their patients as well. So my wife has similar experience. Kelly Lambrese is our Chief Patient Experience Officer, and she's a nurse with a lot of experience in management leadership. And so she really helps oversee the clinical part of our business and understand sort of the reimbursement piece, which is tricky in healthcare. I'm more involved in business development and some of the financial stuff.
Okay.
Nice.
Very good. So you have a long history of kind of working in similar fields to this.
Yes.
And tell our audience a little bit about, because they may not be fully aware of what an infusion center is and what you do there.
Sure. So our ambulatory infusion center is really focused on managing patients with autoimmune illnesses, things like rheumatoid arthritis, lupus disease, MS, Crohn's disease. So there's a variety of illnesses. Matter of fact, most of the new biotech drugs that are being developed are for autoimmune diseases. So unlike my last business where patients were acute and short-term, these patients tend to be on for several months, if not years, getting an infusion on average maybe once a month. And they're used to going to a center for that. Historically, it's been hospitals. Some physician offices provide the service. But we're an independent ambulatory infusion center that's agnostic. We're not tied to one specialty like GI or rheumatology. We'll treat patients with thyroid eye disease, Crohn's disease, or MS. So we tend to treat a wide variety of patients with different autoimmune illnesses. Most of our patients will come to us consistently. If it's not the new drug for early stage dementia is Leqembi, right? Those patients will be getting that drug every 2 weeks, and we have a few patients scheduled to start soon. So these are patients that are long-term. That's why our ambulatory infusion center is staffed by experienced IV nurses and nurse practitioners.
Nice.
They work under the direction of both our chief medical officer, who's Dr. Rick Schnorr, a gastroenterologist with a lot of experience in autoimmune diseases. And then Mark Fisher is the rheumatologist who's our medical director, and he works very closely with our clinical staff and with Kelly primarily.
Okay.
So we have a team of experienced people there.
So you're focusing on autoimmune disease, but you do other things also, it sounds like, too. It's not all autoimmune.
Most of it is. We're not doing any of the acute things. So we're not doing antibiotics or really even hydration, that type of thing anymore. We do, so in many of our autoimmune patients require intravenous medication, but some just require injections. For instance, when Primacare decided to close their infusion suite, we had an orderly transition where they had hundreds of patients with osteoporosis.
That was what I was going to ask you, because I know you do that also.
Yes, we do Prolia, right? And so we've been managing in hundreds of patients with osteoporosis that have been referred to us. These patients just come in twice a year, so it's every 6 months for that. So that's a lot of our patient population, but it's also complemented by the patients that need IV medications.
Right.
Bernie, I'm going to back up a minute.
Sure.
So Kelly, I understand, is your Chief Patient Experience Officer. I thought that was amazing because sometimes, especially in infusion centers, you don't see a Chief Patient Experience Officer. So you are very patient-centric.
Yes, thank you for that. You know, our mission really has been to improve the patient journey and experience because we said autoimmune patients are going to be getting these therapies for an extended period of time. So we wanted to improve the experience in the journey. We want to make it very easy and user-friendly for the providers that refer patients to us and sign their prescriptions. And then we're also focused on reducing the cost of care. When you compare it to a hospital, ambulatory infusion centers are considerably less money for the payers. Ultimately, that's all of us, right?
Yeah, right. So first of all, I love your branding too.
Thank you.
I was just like their little tagline, infusing health and wellness into your life. Very cute.
Thank you.
So when I looked at your website, I was kind of amazed. Well, I was amazed, not kind of amazed. I was amazed. It just looks like the patients are so comfortable when they go there. And I'll tell you a little short story. My dad was a dialysis patient, and he was not comfortable when he used to go for his dialysis treatments. We traveled to Italy. He had a dialysis treatment in Venice, and it was a totally different experience. Wow. And he's like, why can't they do this where I get my dialysis? And it was just like simple things.
What was it? What was different about it? I'm curious.
Well, in the dialysis center that we have locally, it was a recliner and they weren't the most comfortable. Okay. This place in Venice, it was more of, they went to... they really tried to make it more of like a home experience. Okay. So they had very comfortable beds. They had, the rooms were just very nice. It wasn't like just a recliner here and here and here and here, and everyone's lined up like little soldiers.
Yeah, right.
It was just very, very nice.
More
and
individualized.
The staff was very well, you felt like you're not just the next one to climb into the recliner. You're like, you're a person, and they, you know what I mean? And it just automatically rekindled that thought when I was looking at your website and looking at how your patients are set up over there.
Well,
So
as you mentioned, having Kelly as the Chief Patient Experience Officer kind of sets the tone, not just for the patients, but the staff as well. That when we developed the business, we wanted this to be more spa-like than institutional.
Okay.
We really want it to be different than a hospital or even sometimes physician offices that are offering infusion therapy. So that's been a big focus of ours, and it's just wonderful when we have new patients come in to say, this place is beautiful, and they love the staff. Families come, so there's always plenty of room for caregivers. We have one large suite, which is more community-oriented, that most people enjoy, but we also have a private suite where if somebody wants to be by themselves, so we're offering both. But it is all about improving the patient experience.
Well, I just think that it's great that thought went into that, because when this becomes part of your life, it's like you want that piece to be comfortable too, and respectful.
Yep.
Yeah. And it seems like looking at your website, like you nailed it.
Yeah, I'm particularly interested in this also because, Nancy and I started in patient experience, actually. Maybe our viewers don't know that, but that's how we actually started doing what we do now. It was all a patient experience type of business. So, a lot of this stuff with patient experience, it doesn't even cost a lot more money. I'm sure there's some with the build out of the space, but a lot of it is culture and having the right personnel, I would think.
Yes, it really is. I mean, we're fortunate the people that we've been able to hire. One of our lead infusion nurses worked with many of the primary care patients in their infusion suite at the time. So she came over to make that a very smooth transition. And she's just Lisa Pasternak's been a wonderful addition to our team. So, the other thing about the patient experience is, we always compare it to a hospital. Because when I looked to put the business together, 5-6 years ago, 75% of the infusions for patients like these were being done at a hospital, and the rest primarily in a physician's office. Hospitals play an important role in the communities. There's no discounting that. And they do acute care very well. But when it comes to chronic care that requires a little more personal touch, I mean, they're institutional. It's like you can't help. You know, driving to a hospital, parking the car, walking into a building full of sick people. You know, it's not always people are sometimes uncomfortable with that. I also think about the patient experience. A lot of patients are driving by our facility or Fall River to go to Boston or to Providence, now fighting the traffic on the Washington
Bridge. We were talking about that
Bridge.
earlier, sure.
yes.
It doesn't make sense in many instances.
It really doesn't and it's not a one-time deal. It's like an every month type deal. So for people fighting traffic on the Washington Bridge or even driving up to Boston to get Remicade or Ocrevus or IVIG, it really doesn't make a lot of sense when you have a quality facility to easily service not just southeastern Massachusetts, but nearby Rhode Island, the East Bay. I think our first couple of early stage dementia patients that are coming in are from Rhode Island.
Okay.
Yeah, they're coming a little bit of
But you're right. You know, a lot of times I have patients who will go to Boston for particular issues, and sometimes it makes sense because there are services that we don't really provide adequately here. But it's rare, actually.
Right.
But a lot of people do go up there for things, and I wonder, well, why? You know, because there's the same service down here, if not the same, maybe even better. And the meds are the same.
The meds are the same. The physician's prescribing them, whether it's a Boston physician that is managing a patient down here and learn about us. We have patients finding us on the web because there are infusion center locators that if people Google infusion center near me, will probably pop up at the top of the list in Fall River. But a lot of folks go there to find out where can they see an ad for thyroid eye disease on television.
Right.
They want to learn more about it and figure out where they can go get it, right? So not just is there generic infusion center locators, but each of the biotech companies have them as well. So I've signed up with most of the biotech companies. So for patients looking for, you know, Remicade or Ocrevus for MS or IVIG, you know, they can find us through the biotech company.
So if they went on the company website, they would have a link to a close facility being yours. Can you
user-friendly.
Can you walk us a little through a typical patient experience from, you know, the beginning of getting an appointment at your facility to completion of the infusion? I think that would be useful for our viewers to understand.
Sure. Well, there's a couple of different touch points, right? There's the physician touch points, and then there's the patient. So we typically get a referral from a physician who is prescribing an infusion or injectable medication for an autoimmune disease. We'll get that referral, and the first thing we do, which the doctors love, is we get the prior auths. I understand some of the hospitals have put the burden back on the practices, and so we'll get the prior authorizations. And really what that means for a patient is that we're confirming that their health insurance provider is going to reimburse us for the cost of the medication.
Right.
These medications are very expensive, as you know.
Right.
So we'll get the prior auth for the patient. We'll call the patient, let them know that we received a referral from your doctor. They want to schedule a time for you to come in here. We walked them through every step. We've called your health insurance company. They've confirmed payment. The other thing that we do, a lot of the biotech companies have what they call copay assistance programs.
Okay.
So, and each company has a different one, but you can imagine with the expensive drugs come expensive copays. But most patients qualify. So what we'll do is if we find out there's a copay, we'll check with the biotech company and submit the patient demographics. And we've been successful already in getting a number of patients approved so that they don't have to pay out of pocket.
Okay.
It's a copay assistance program from the biotech company.
You know, I think that's huge. So I'm a visiting nurse, and the struggles that I see patients are just challenged by their physical condition. What they have to go through and how they have to navigate our convoluted healthcare system is crazy. And, you know, to have someone do even like little things for you. So this is major, you know, that they just don't have to deal with payment because one of my patients went without a payment source. She wasn't getting paid. Disability was an 18-month wait. She had to contact our state representative. So this is great. And she was sick. She didn't want to be on the phone for 2 hours.
And one of the greatest sources of stress is the financial part of it, right? Is this going to be covered? How much am I going to have to pay? And so we try to take that out of it. We probably over-communicate with the patients. We're trying to use technology to follow up with them via text message or however they prefer to get messages. But we'll work closely with the patients to alleviate that concern. A number of patients, we invite them in to say, come for a tour. If you're not sure, especially patients that have been coming to this building for a long time. We've had several patients just walk across the street, come in. We've welcomed them in. If we sense that they're a little apprehensive, we'll say, come in. You can meet the nurse. You can see the facility. And so that's the type of thing. We really want them to come in with their eyes opening and kind of not stressed out. They're going to be anyway, but we want to try to calm them down and allay their fears as much as we can.
Yeah, and that's great that you do all the prior auths because that can be such a stressful point. I mean, some of these drugs are tens of thousands of dollars.
They are. Yeah, they're very, very expensive. So, the prior auth it's probably more headache for the physician than the patient. But, you read about physician burnout. What is it? Dealing with health insurance companies getting prior auth.
It's definitely a big part of burnout is all the paperwork and that, and the prior auths are a big part of that. But I think from the patient's perspective, it must be really nice to know that I know that my drug is covered when I walk in there.
Well, it's really nice, too, that you're walking into a place that has set up on purpose a family atmosphere with a high level of clinical competency. Like, that's a great pairing, right? Because that's not a guarantee.
And when you come up there, you'll see the views are amazing.
Oh.
I mean, 5th floor, we have it's really the top floor. It's an iconic building, as you know. It's
the Infusion penthouse.
It's an ensuite elevator, so people come in, they're in our facility, in our suite, and we've set up the best part of the suite for the patients, so they have great views of, the highway. The other thing people look for is ease of access, And the highway the ramp is right outside our driveway. We do have dedicated parking for patients both at the building and then even across the street, so there's reserved parking for patients as well.
So once they walk in, what is their experience from that point on? How does that work?
They're typically greeted by our medical assistant or an office manager who already expects them, knows what it's like. So we call it our no waiting room because people very seldom sit in the chairs. They get seen right away. We walk them into the suite right away. Obviously there's paperwork that needs to be done.
Sure, you can't get away from that.
You can't, so we walk through that and make sure that we have everything signed properly. We talk to them about what the therapy is going to be like, how long it's going to take, and when their next visit would be.
So now, talk to us about access that they have set up. Do they have to come with access available, or
they don't have to? Some do. Some have ports or PICC lines, but most patients, it's a peripheral IV that we're starting once a month, and our nurses are fortunately proficient in getting IVs started. So
nice.
Yeah.
I have a question for you. Based on my experience in home care, a lot of my patients with severely disabled children are going up to Boston for their central line dressing changes or to do a needle change. I know you talked a little bit about the home care in the beginning, and you've moved and transitioned into this type of business model. But do you ever service patients like that?
We're not doing that yet.
Okay.
Because of the way the staffing and the facility is set up, we're really open to anything. One of the newer therapies we're starting to do is prolastin for alpha-1 patients, and so we have
our
first patient coming in today.
Alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency.
What is it again?
Alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency. So it's a condition that causes premature COPD. It can also cause liver disease, cirrhosis also.
Okay.
Yeah, we're starting to see more of that. There was a need identified with the pulmonary group at Primacare, and so we said, let's look into it. Let's make sure we can source the drug. We get the proper billing codes. The staff is trained on it. So So there are always new things that either new drugs that are being approved or things that we haven't necessarily done yet, but we'll approach it the right way. We're open to trying anything new. That I'm not sure, we're not ready for that yet, but it's a good point. It's a real important need,
Yeah, for sure. What is your capture area like?
For the most part, our radius is probably 25 miles. We do have patients coming down from Taunton. I kind of wonder now with Good Sam closing their infusion center, we're trying to make some calls up there to see if we can help. We're interested in opening up a few more centers over the next 12 months. So there'll be more satellites, but in different parts of Massachusetts as well as Rhode Island. But I'd say for the most part, it's a 25, 30-mile radius. I do have to say, Dr. Fisher has a hell of a following from when he was this time in Boston. People are traveling a long way to come see him, and some to come to our facility as well. That's great.
So if someone is driving up to Boston or suffering the Washington Street Bridge, how do they transition? Like if they're listening to this podcast and be like, oh, that would be like, I live right down the street from them. How do they make that move?
Well, the first thing I would do is encourage them to call us. They'd probably speak to Kelly. Most physicians are going to be empathetic to that issue.
Yeah.
Some might not be. I mean, there are reasons that people want patients to come to their centers, and but most, I think, realize, like this is stressful enough. Why sit on Route 93 waiting to get to Boston or on the bridge? So if patients call us, we can help them. We can reach out to their physician and say, your patient has expressed an interest in coming here for the convenience. We want you to know who we are. And I think once most doctors realize that we're clinically competent and working under the supervision of respected physicians, that they'll be okay with that. I can't say everyone, but I think most will.
Primacare is Southeastern New England's trusted leader in medical care. With offices in Fall River and surrounding communities, we're dedicated to your well-being. Our carefully selected team of more than 150 providers offers world-class primary and specialty medical care. Primacare doctors are supported by a skilled staff trained to deliver comprehensive radiology, imaging, and testing services. Primacare is large enough to take care of all your medical needs, but small enough to care for you personally. Primacare is by your side.
Is there a waiting period for new patients?
No, we don't have one. Yeah, I mean,
everywhere you call, it's like, I'll see you in 3 months.
Yeah, the holdup is more, getting the prior auths. That could take a few days, maybe a week. But the nice thing about this space, unlike the home infusion space, is it's not urgent. When we were at home infusion, we got a referral 1 o'clock on a Friday, and they wanted the drug at somebody's home at 6 o'clock at night to teach them and verify insurance.
Right.
These are more scheduled, so nobody's really expecting to come in the next day, possibly the next week. So it's a little more low-key and a little more evenly paced.
That's great. Getting back to the experience a little bit, so after the prior auth is done, the appointment's made, they come up, they have to, of course, do some paperwork, which we all have to do.
Yeah.
After that, it sounds like they usually don't wait too long in the waiting room, and then they go to the rooms.
Yep.
Now, what does the room look like for the infusion?
Yeah, so we have it's a large suite with 5 chairs and a nursing station, flat screen TVs, snacks, warm blankets. Like I said, we want this to be
warm blankets,
more spa-like than institutional, right? So that's kind of been our philosophy. And we're learning. We're getting good feedback from patients and adjusting some things. But like I said, they can get snacks. The recliners are comfortable, and there are guest chairs next to them. So there's one large room, and then we have a private room. And depending upon the patient's clinical condition or their interest in being alone, some people are coming in and working for an hour or two while they're getting their medication. So we give them the opportunity to do that.
And in the one large room, are there privacy screens?
It's funny. We have them, but we haven't really had to use. No one's requesting them.
Yeah, no. And if when I accompany my dad a few times, I like seeing other people too.
Yeah.
Because then you get to chat and you get to form your little community.
You're exactly right. And we're finding that people, especially folks that have been going to the Primus Suite in the past, are used to being part of a community of patients that went at the same time. We're starting to see that develop in our place as well.
Nice.
And the typical infusion takes how long, would you say? I know it's variable depending on the drug.
Yeah. So the typical infusion is probably an hour to two.
Okay.
Some will go beyond that, like IVIGs. They're bigger doses. They might go 3 to 4 hours.
Okay.
But on average, it's an hour or two. The Prolia for osteoporosis is an injection, so they're literally in and out within half hour, 20 minutes,
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the process of getting a new medication approved? Like when you hear about a new medication, I'm just curious about that whole thing. Are the drug reps coming to you and saying, "Hey, you should incorporate this," or are you seeing it in
I mean, how does Bernie find out about the drug?
well, yeah, are you reading it in like a medical literature and like how do you get a new drug into your place to offer to the community?
Like the new drug that you were mentioning for alpha-1 antitrypsin.
Right.
I mean, how did you determine that was a need? How did that come to you?
Well, so we, the first thing we do is we make sure our wholesaler, specialty distributor, carries the medication. So we'll buy the medications from a wholesaler. Normally when they're going through the approval process, I'll kind of follow them in trade journals or even the Boston Globe, which, this last week they announced that Blue Cross of Mass is covering Leqembi now, for which they hadn't approved in the past. So, we'll follow it that way. Drug reps will come in and are happy to share information with you. And I try to accommodate them because I know physicians are busy and stuff, but they've been very good resources for us as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure. What about if, if I'm working for a company, they have a network that I can use. Are you network specific or does that not come into play?
Meaning like with the insurances,
Yes.
like Steward Network.
Thank you for
versus-
clarifying my questions.
That's okay. I want everyone to understand.
You always got my back.
I do.
Yeah.
I
So
suppose.
what we've spent the last really 3 months doing is getting in network with the payers.
Okay.
So it's a process. You have to get your clinical staff credentialed and you apply. And we've been able to get most payer contracts that we want, a couple of pending, and it just takes time. It just takes time. So, we're hoping over the next 30 days to have a couple of contracts that we've been waiting for, but we're participating with most of them. But it does take time to apply, to credential the physicians, get a fee schedule, work that out.
Okay.
So private pay really doesn't come into play then because the cost is
Yeah, it really
prohibitive, right?
doesn't. I mean, most, whether it's, Mass Health or Medicare and all the managed care plans in between, cover the costs of these. So we haven't really had to deal with private pay. In some cases, with copays, if someone doesn't qualify for copay assistance, they could have, a pretty good balance. But they'll know up front what that is before they get treated, and that's an exception. Most people have primary insurance. They have, managed Medicare. They'll have a secondary policy as well. So we'll bill both the primary and secondary. So there aren't that many copay issues we have to deal with.
That's good.
Yeah.
Bernie, if there are clinicians that are listening to this podcast and being like, this sounds really interesting, I want to work at an infusion center.
Yeah.
Do you, what kind of background are you looking for? And then do you have a training program if someone really doesn't have an expertise in this, but they're like, oh, I can really feel passionate about this?
Yeah. Most of our nurses need to have good peripheral IV skills.
Sure.
And ideally some experience with the autoimmune medications. That's not mission critical, but the good IV skills is. And I don't think we could, we have the resources right now to train people to become proficient in IVs. They could probably do that next door here, right?
Probably here.
Yeah.
Yes, they probably could. Tell me about your staff, though. How much staff do you have, and what type of staff do you have?
Sure. So currently we have 2 IV nurses that are one's part-time. She's there 3 days a week. We have another to back her up. We have 2 nurse practitioners, one who had experience and has experience in pediatrics. The other is experienced in neurology. They're there per diem, so they're not there every week.
Okay.
But they have been trained on a software and a policies and procedures. And as our volume grows, because we're still fairly new to the area. We did have a nice influx of patients from Primacare. But as our volume continues to grow, we'll bring these people on a more consistent basis.
Do you have pediatric patients right now?
We
Or
don't.
Is this a type of center that would see pediatrics, so there's not really enough volume for the infusions that you do?
Yeah, I don't. We haven't. It hasn't been requested of us yet. I'm sure we would take patients. I think it's, and Kelly would correct me, but I believe it's 12 and up.
Okay.
We'd be able to accept patients now.
Yeah.
Do you do blood infusions too, or is it mid?
No, blood transfusions.
Yeah.
No, I mean, the closest thing to a blood product is IVIG. But we're not doing any transfusions.
Okay. How was the transition from, the start? I mean, a lot of the patients from Primacare, from the infusion center, when they closed down, came over to you, obviously. That was probably good, but...
It was good, but it's like that "be careful what you wish for" thing. Remember the internet commercials when the guy, they would walk, they got a few hits, and then all of a sudden, boom, 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 boom. So all of a sudden we get, a tsunami of osteoporosis patients coming over. Now, they all didn't need treatment that month,
Right.
but people were anxious.
Yeah.
So they just wanted to know we're going to take care of them. We'll schedule if it's May or June or the end of the year. But it was busy. I mean, there were a lot of patients that needed prior authorizations that needed to be scheduled, and we did fine during that transition. It was a lot of work, but now it's kind of leveled off. Most of those patients have been kind of onboarded and scheduled, and we still get new ones.
You're going to continue doing the osteoporosis infusions, it sounds like.
We do. We're finding that that for the osteoporosis patients, a lot of them are getting Prolia, but we're also finding out from the payers that if they have osteopenia, they're not going to qualify for Prolia. So some of those patients are getting reclass. If they've had a fracture, there's a drug that's been out for a couple of years now called Evenity, and it's something that would be good for osteoporosis if they've had a fracture.
Okay.
So those are the three, for the most part, that we're administering.
Which is similar to what they were doing, I think, over at the infusion center at Primacare.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, very good.
Bernie, what's like up and coming in the infusion therapies in general, and like kind of what are you excited about when you think of Sweet Life and how it can like grow and expand?
Yeah, well, it's, when you look at the money being spent in research, a little less of it is in pharma and more of it is going into biotech. So there's a lot of new drugs coming out. It seems like every year there's another blockbuster. We're just the two most recent ones that we're seeing, we're starting to see people refer to us is Tepezza for thyroid eye disease and Krystexxa for gout. And, and what's happening is patients are learning about these through the media.
Right.
And then asking their physicians about it. And most probably don't qualify, but if they qualify clinically, then we can infuse it and make sure that the payers are going to reimburse for it.
Do you get a lot of patients questioning you on stuff that they've seen or things that they've read?
Yeah, I mean, it happens not infrequently. I think that there's so much in the media about new drugs that I was questioned today about, an inhaler that I knew would not be covered for the patient. Unfortunately, a lot of these drugs, when they first come out, they're not covered. There has to be a certain experience before the insurance companies pick them up. So it's kind of it's an interesting situation because you have to prescribe it for there to be experience for it to ultimately get on the on the coverage for the insurance, but it's hard to get it covered initially. It's a lot of paperwork and prior auths, which is, I guess, what you're doing.
Yeah, that's what we're doing. Yeah,
I mean, a lot of these drugs, like you're doing, which are, companies that spend a lot of money making a drug for a small patient population.
Right.
There's always going to be a prior auth.
Yeah.
Never going to be.
No, it's a
process.
Right. Yeah, it's really a process.
And that's why these drugs are so expensive. I mean, it's a small population. They spend millions trying to get these drugs covered. Patients often say, how can that drug be $10,000 a treatment? Well, it's because there's a handful of patients in the country that can benefit from it.
Right.
So, yeah. I mean, some of the obviously some of the diagnoses like lupus and that there's many more, but there are some of these conditions that we're developing new drugs for, they're really small numbers of patients. So
Those drugs are very expensive.
outrageous, yeah.
Very, very expensive.
Outrageous, yeah.
Bernie, what have been some of your most satisfying moments with the Infusion Center?
It's nice when people come in and feel good about it, the place, the staff, the facility. It's just I kind of hear anecdotally or all over here if I'm walking around the facility, how pleased people are and their families. So it's just, it's the reason that we do what we do. And like I said, our goal is to improve the patient experience, and to hear that. We get a lot of 5-star Google reviews from patients that have been in the facility. They're happy to share their experience with others.
Nice.
We like that. Yeah. Yeah.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Now, can you share a particular patient story with us?
Without obviously revealing any personal information that will be a HIPAA violation.
Yeah, no. Yeah, we wouldn't. Kelly's probably the closer to the patients and better qualified to answer that question. I don't know that I have one particular story. I know with one patient, we've been working closely with him. There's a Krystexxa, which is the new drug for gout. His physician is prescribing that, but he has to go through some pre-treatment regimen. But Kelly probably talks to him, once a week and keeps him updated in terms of the insurance, the copay assistance, reassuring him he'll schedule, but he needs to, get the pre-medications as his physicians are ordering. So it's kind of rewarding when you work so hard and the people are so anxious and it all comes together and they're happy to be treated, by us in that facility.
I'm just it's just really nice to know there's someone out there providing true patient-centric services in this area, and someone who thinks of that and really truly does put the patient first. And then just to, you say it so nonchalantly, oh, she calls and updates them weekly. That's huge, because you're not chasing them when you're sick and you're not feeling good. For someone to call you and say, hey, this is where we are, it just someone's thinking about me. Someone cares about me. I think that's huge. And obviously it happens all the time because you're so nonchalant when you mention it.
And we try to make it easy for the physicians. I mean, a lot of the patients want to know that their physicians on board, supports us, is happy. And, Kelly always says we try to, Staples is the easy button, right? So we always try to do that and make it, we want to make the, we consider it white glove service with the physicians. We try to simplify the referral process, the verification process, and any ongoing management. We have an interesting relationship with Primacare now where we can get documentation out of ECW. So rather than call a practice manager, have her
you can get into our
copies, right? Make a dozen copies that she or he's going to fax over to us. And it's just we can go in and we know the documentation we need, but rather than have to ask and wait and bother somebody who's already busy, we can do it ourselves. So
that's great.
Yeah, I think making it easy for the physicians.
Just a question, and you might think I'm crazy, but can you, so if you have a patient that's on the Epic system and not ECW, are you able to access different electronic health records?
No, so we're able to do it with Prima through kind of a partnership we have with Prima. We've signed the appropriate documentation. They see, thank God, Dr. Fogel and, Rich and Peter see the value in making it easy for the physicians to refer. Matter of fact, we're listed if people can e-prescribe now to us as well through the pharmacy component of the pharmacy tab in ECW. So, there's 3 ways physicians, they can call us with the referral, their office. They can send in something through ECW prescription, or on our website we have we have documentation that's customized. So rather than have a generic order form, we have one for Ocrevus and one for Remicade, one for IVIG. So it asks the appropriate questions of a physician that they might not be thinking about at the time, right? So it's going to prompt them. We get, answer this, check this box. So we try to make it easy for the physicians to send patients to us, and then managing them. We were able to pull documentation out of ECW, but it's not every clinical record we can go into.
When you think about the intent of electronic health records to make it easy for the transition of the flow of patient information, it would be great if there was some way for facilities to appropriately access patient information in the electronic health records.
They all work in different silos.
I know, but it would just be great if there was some type of
It would be
portal
nice. Yeah.
for the caregivers,
Yeah, we
to
could
access
get into a whole
information.
conversation about EMRs and how they've their good points and their where they fail.
Sure.
But that would be a whole
I
other
know.
discussion. And
I know, because we have so many silos with different
God,
systems,
yeah,
and if
they
there was
don't all
something
talk.
that would tie
that was
together.
the initial thought. They were all going
Right.
to communicate, but they don't, of course. We all know that.
No.
Yeah, sadly.
It's too bad.
So, yeah. If someone goes on your website, will they see a list of what is available for medications to be infused?
Yeah,
'Cause that would be interesting, I would think.
Yeah, we've broke it out by specialty. So,
Okay.
like, you can check rheumatology versus neurology versus GI. We have all the drugs listed that we can infuse. Doesn't
Okay.
mean they're all covered, right? But these are drugs that we can purchase, we can infuse, but it all depends upon the health insurance.
Sure.
Right? So we flush that out quickly. But yeah, going on the website, I think, gives a good view of not just the site and the clinical staff, but all of the diagnoses that we typically treat
Right.
and the medications that are used to treat them.
And what is the website? If someone were to go on it.
Sure, it's sweetlifehealth.com, but sweet is SUITE,
Okay.
right? So it's sweetlifehealth.com, and it's very user-friendly, and I think gives a wealth of information about who we are.
And if they want to call you, what number would they use?
We have the 508-567-5666, so that's our phone number.
Okay.
And people can email us, admin, ADMIN, @sweetlifehealth.com.
Okay.
So we respond to all methods of communication.
Great.
Yeah.
That's great. That's excellent. I've asked about all my questions. Do you have anything else you want to ask before we wrap it up?
I've crossed off everything on my list.
All right. Well, good. Well, at that point then, is there any one message you want to leave the audience? It's always a good way to close.
Sure. We would encourage people that everybody knows somebody who probably has an autoimmune illness, and whether they can relate to the drug Remicade or rheumatoid arthritis, there's just a variety of diagnoses. But if they have a family member, a loved one, a friend or a neighbor that's traveling great distances or isn't completely satisfied where they're getting their infusion because people might be late, they might get it rescheduled, or the experience isn't good, we'd encourage them to call us. They can certainly visit our facility, but probably speak to Kelly and to learn more about who we are, what we can do, and how we do it. So we just encourage people to call us, find us on the web. And some people are just stopping by, which is fine too.
Well, I love the fact that you're focusing on patient experience. I love the fact that you're trying to make it less onerous on the physician, too, because that is a real chore for us and a big part of our burnout, definitely. So that's helpful. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
And it's been great having you here. And of course, I want to thank our audience for listening to the show, and I hope that everyone's enjoyed this. If you'd like to become a sponsor, please contact us at 774-319-4230. And special thanks to Ron Gamache for our intro music, for Primacare, your trusted medical providers in southeastern New England, and BioSkills of Northeast for producing our show, and available to produce your show by calling 774-301-8811. Bay Coast Bank, just right for all of your financial needs. Visit baycoast.bank or call 508-678-7641 to learn more. And Duncan Hearing Healthcare you can trust, with sites in Fall River, Dartmouth, Falmouth, and Centerville. For more information, visit their website at duncanhearing.com. And Bernie, once again, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Talking
My
about
pleasure.
the Infusion Center was very interesting, and I love the approach that you have, and it's very patient-centric, which is, it's what we need to do in medicine.
Absolutely. And thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
You're very welcome. And thanks again, everyone.